Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Waves Live. I'm your host, Johnny Herrera. With me is Tanya Thurman. Tanya, what'd you think of the word today? Yeah, it's on.
I think it was really good.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it a lot. It was talking about how we can give ourselves over to God and using our different gifts or our different talents and through giving how you're serving God that way.
I was talking to a friend about how it's not really anything that we can do to impress the Lord, and it's really our faith He wants. And with our faith, we get closer to Him, and it just he with Him, we have all of this potential, all of this.
Right. Yeah. Our obedience. He doesn't want to take it. He wants us to give it freely, and that's what makes it that much better. It's like if you have somebody that you say you have to do this, it's more likely that it's going to be more rewarding for both parties if you're all doing everything voluntarily versus being forced to do something.
Yeah, because I think the Lord, in a way that we can't understand, He not only gives us things like love and peace and harmony, He is these things. And it can't be real love if we're just like some little computer programs that are forced to love Him. And that's why He gives us that choice, I believe.
He was also talked about this morning about you can be a really good person, but you may not know God.
Yeah.
There are people out there who do all kinds of great things, but they don't know God and they don't have that relationship. So, God's going to look at all the great things and He's going to go, well, where was I in your life? When did you make room for me? This is what I told you to do, but you never listened to me. You were never open to me. Yeah. And that's what God is really looking for. It's like, it's great that you're a good person, but I really want your obedience and I want your faith and I want your love.
Yeah.
Freely given to me. So.
And Tanya, I don't know if I ever told you, I was an atheist for most of my life. I'm 39 years old, so until the age of 37, I was an atheist, and I used to think that. I used to think, you know what? I'm a better person than some of these Christians that I see, and it could very well have been the truth. But a Christian friend did explain to me once. It's like, well, it's not about you're not competing with other people. You're simply not being the best you that you can be unless you have the Lord. Tanya, you're going to talk to us a little bit about your walk with the Lord. Have you always been close to Him? Are you born in a Christian family? Were you ever an atheist like me?
I was born to unwed parents, or teenage unwed parents.
Okay.
And my grandmother, she was very, very strong Catholic.
Okay. What part of the country was this?
In Michigan.
Michigan.
So
okay.
I was born out east.
So Yankee.
Yes.
Okay.
But my parents, they moved to Colorado when I was 4.
Okay.
And then they shortly after that, they had gotten married, but then they got divorced.
Okay.
So, but I grew up in a household where my mom and my stepdad, they had marijuana plants.
Wow.
So from an early age, I knew all about, hydroponics and how to grow and cultivate
the hippies, they
drugs,
sound like kind of
I don't know. They had an awful lot of it, so I'm sure they were probably selling, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But they were definitely using.
Okay.
But yeah, I knew how to separate all the seeds and everything by the time I was 9.
Okay.
So I knew a lot about drugs by the time I was 9. And I didn't think of them as something bad because it was just a way of life. My stepdad was very verbally and emotionally and mentally abusive. So every time I was very, very bad in math. I couldn't do numbers. I transposed numbers. I didn't find out till I was an adult that it's a form of dyslexia.
Oh.
But I would transpose numbers, so I couldn't get math problems very well. And he would just always tell me that I was very, very stupid because I couldn't get it. Because he loved math, and so because I couldn't do that,
I found out late in life that I have ADD or ADHD. Mm-hmm. And back then it wasn't ADD. Back then it was stupid.
Yes. You're just rambunctious. You're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
Or lazy or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then I had my mom where I can remember the first time I ever got a criticism from her.
Yeah.
Because I was about 7, and it was the first time I had ever put my hair up by myself, and I was so proud of myself.
Oh.
And her response to that was how horrible it looked. And so it kind of it showed me that I couldn't rely on the people who were supposed to be lifting me up and protecting me to actually do that.
Really?
So
okay.
it made it very difficult for me to even accept not just criticism, but it also made it difficult for me to accept praise, because I always wondered, okay, well, what's in it for them that they're saying this about me? Why would you? Because there must be something in it for you, or you're lying to me.
Before I knew the Lord, that's what I always try to figure people out, like, why are they doing this? In fact, one of the this young man, I know one of my best friends now, he was this young white kid I met at a coffee shop who helped me to find the Lord. I mean, the Lord sent a bunch of people, but he was like one of the main proponents, and he would call me all the time. And I thought at one point, and we laugh about it now, but at one point I thought he was gay, because I was looking for his agenda to want to spend so much time with me. It was, the kid's got to be, that's how I saw the world and everybody.
Yes, yeah. And my grandmother instilled that in me too. Because, as I got older and started becoming a teenager, I mean, she would tell me, well, the only reason why boys are even interested in you is because they want that one thing.
Yeah.
And so, and my mom wasn't really anti, intimacy.
Yeah.
So she would talk about how great that stuff is and everything else. And so, I had this in my head that, okay, if any guy was ever, yes, if anyone was to ever like me, that's the only reason why they would like me.
Oh my goodness.
And so I kind of got into that mentality.
Why is your husband shaking his head yes? No, I'm just kidding. Getting Pablo in trouble. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, and it wound up where I was, by the time I was 17, I had gotten pregnant with my oldest daughter.
Ben Garcia.
So by the time I was 17, I got pregnant with my oldest daughter.
Yeah.
So I had her when I was in high school still.
Yeah.
But I did graduate.
Nice.
But I still wasn't. I was still not looking for love in any of the right places.
Okay.
Even going to the Catholic Church, my grandmother, I mean, most of what I heard about God was how, condemning and how, jealous and vengeful and
well, I grew up in Catholic school.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only. I still have a friend from there who's also an atheist, and well, okay, I'm not gonna. I know some very spiritually strong Catholics, but well, that's just. Okay.
Yes. I started going down that road myself, where I was like, God must hate me, and then I started, he's punishing me for something, and I started to, well, there is no God was basically where I was getting to, because it was just, why would all this stuff be happening, in my life if there was a God? I hadn't really adopted the ideas that there are things that can happen that are bad, but those things make you a stronger person, and they prepare you for other things later on in life. They're building your character, and if you don't have all those bad things happening to you at some point in your life, you're never going to understand or be able to appreciate the good things. So it took me a while to develop that.
I think of it in terms of, I remember my daughter when she was younger. She was 7, and I made her, or I wouldn't give her any ice cream until she finished her vegetables. And she was like 5 or 4 years old, and she got so upset with me, and she said, "You're the worst daddy ever," and she marches off of the room. She's a little dramatic to begin with, but I think that's what happens with us when God hands us these things that we're like, why are you doing this? And he has his reasons that are beyond and above us, and that's where our faith kicks in. That's where we have to go, okay, Lord, I'm going to pray about the situation, but if you don't want to change it for me, then I'm just going to walk in whatever you tell me to do.
Yeah, and you have to really look at it from his perspective. Looking at it from our own perspective, you're just not going to get it. You have to try and put as best you can in God's shoes to see yourself through his eyes.
Yeah.
Say, okay, there is something that I'm being prepared for. I mean, before I met my husband that I have now, I was married before.
Okay.
I left home when I was 18, and I got married right away.
Okay.
And my ex-husband was physically, verbally, sexually abusive to me. And I was married to him for 9.5 years. I have 2 of my children from that marriage that are the result of rape.
Wow.
So it was a very, very difficult. And his thing was, you are never taking my children to church.
Yeah.
You will not, bring anything regarding God into my house. So, it was like, okay, well, this is my life. This is the way it is. You know, I worked multiple hours. I mean, I work all night long. I would get off work at 7. I'd run home. I'd pick up my kids, take them to school, come back home, get maybe a 2-hour nap, then go back to work. Yeah. So I was just running myself ragged, and I was to the point where I didn't know what else to do. I was ready to kill myself.
Well, at this point, your husband told you not to, so I'm guessing you had brought it up, or you were interested in pursuing a relationship with the Lord, in some way.
No, my grandmother, he knew how my grandmother was, since she was Catholic, and so he didn't like the idea of of me going to church, and then, you know, as the kids started coming along, he didn't want them to go to church either. Yeah. And I really didn't have a big problem with it, because I had already been I felt like I really didn't belong in that church anyways. Yeah. I mean, I just felt like an outsider looking in, and it just made it easier for me to walk away.
What you knew of the Lord, it wasn't, and this is my experience, the Christianity that I grew up with in a Catholic school is nothing. The Christianity I know today is so much different. The God I know today is so much different than the God that I grew up being taught in Catholic school. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, very different.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said before, you know, God to me before I became a Christian was something to be feared. Yeah. That, you know, he was deliberately doing bad things to me because I must have done something horrible.
Because I'm a horrible sinner.
Yes. I didn't understand the concept of forgiveness or grace or any of that before.
No. Yeah. Like in school, there was these like nuns, and they were mean, some of them. Not all nuns are mean. But I remember there was one in particular we just all try to stay away from. And I was like, I know when I see her, I'm going to get in trouble, so I'm just going to try to avoid her. And that's how I thought of the Lord. Yes. It was like, I'm going to get in trouble when I see him, so I'll just put it off. I'll just get in trouble later instead of sooner or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, if he doesn't see it, you know, which, you know, is kind of a ridiculous thing to think of. You know, I mean, if he doesn't see it, then I won't get in trouble. But of course he sees it. He sees everything.
Sees everything.
It's like, you know, it's like that mom with the eyes in the back of her head. You know, the kids are like, how does she know? You know, it's like they just do.
And he doesn't want to get you in trouble. Right. He wants, because you're hurting yourself, and he wants you to stop and to realize all the blessings that you have available to you. And I didn't know that before.
Yes. Yeah, I was at the point where I was ready. I was looking for ways to kill myself, at that point in my marriage, and I decided I would go into the military. Yeah. So I figured, you know, it'd be easy. You know, if I am killed, you know, my kids will get my money. You know, they'll be taken care of.
So you did not care about this life.
I didn't care. I just didn't care, and I was ready to go. Yeah. And but when I got into the military, something started happening to me. It was, I was around people who, they're yelling and screaming at you all day long. Yeah. But they're not hitting you. They're not getting down on you about, you know, just menial, ridiculous things. They're actually tearing you down, and then they're building you back up. Yeah. And so it just kind of, it gave me that sense of empowerment.
They kind of showed you that Tanya has value.
Yes. Yeah, suddenly I was worth something.
I was going to say, when you were with your husband, I have some experience working with homeless youth. I used to work with homeless youth. And some of the young ladies would stick with these guys. It was always a big danger for the homeless young ladies to, you know, be prostituted out. Mm-hmm. And the pimps do these ridiculous things to them, make them sleep with other guys, hit them. But the way they grew up, that's what they knew of love. That's all they didn't know there was something beyond that. That's what they thought love meant. This guy's hitting me, so he must love me. Right. Yes. Okay, so in the military, it wasn't just knocking Tanya down. Mm-hmm. Tanya would do things right, and you know, you'd be recognized for that.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I was promoted very quickly through the ranks.
Okay.
Because I mean, I went from E1, which is the bottom, to an E5, which is the lowest NCO you can get.
Wow.
In under 3 years.
What branch was this?
Army.
Okay.
I was in the Army. And I was a medic. Now, I didn't deploy or anything. I wound up going to a non-deployable unit, which really made me mad. Because I was like, the whole idea of me getting into the military was to go someplace so that I could die, you know. Yeah. And I didn't. And God, because God was watching out for me. God was like, no, that's not what I have planned for you. Yeah. And I had ladies that I worked with in the clinic that started asking me to come to church with them.
Yeah.
And, it was Catholic service. So, but, I went a few times. I was like, yeah, this is okay, but it's still Catholic service. And I'm really uncomfortable with Catholic service.
In the Marine Corps, I went to Buddhist service because they served you cookies. And the NCOs didn't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That is funny. But, yeah, by the time I finished with all my basic training and all my medical training, I had gotten to the point where, I was like, this is really ridiculous. I'm being treated better in the military than I'm being treated at home.
Wow.
So it was a really big wake-up call.
What did your husband have a problem with you joining the military?
No.
He didn't?
No, because he figured I would fail.
Okay.
He said, and that's what he told me. He said, go ahead and give it a try. You're never going to make it through basic training. You'll fail. You'll be home in 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
So, a lot of people, they'd be like, your children must have been such an inspiration for you to make it through basic training. I said, no, actually, it was proving him wrong.
Okay.
That I toughed
see,
it out.
That's what the Lord does. Is the enemy comes at you with these things, and he takes what is meant for your harm, what they mean for your harm, turns it into your good.
Exactly. So all the negative talking and all the putting me down, saying you're never going to make it.
Yeah.
And exactly. I turned it around, and it was just like, no, that's my motivation.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to do this.
Awesome.
Every time I think I can't do it, I'm thinking in my head that's him telling me I can't do it, and so I have to do this.
Okay.
But by the time I got back home, after all my training, I had finally decided, enough is enough.
Yeah.
So I filed for divorce.
Okay.
And and I was really scared because he had made threats before, if I had ever left. So I was kind of scared, but I realized when I got back home, he didn't know what I was capable of at this point.
Yeah.
So he was actually more scared of me than I was of him at this point. So we actually had a very amicable divorce.
Oh,
so
I bet.
It was very nice. I guess as divorces can go, but it was very nice.
Yeah.
And we actually, and I prayed for him and everything else. And he later on he started dating this other girl, and he started to be abusive to her. And she, said, "Look, you need to knock it off." She's like, "If this is why your wife left you, it's no wonder why you're single." And I think it kind of struck a chord.
Okay.
And he actually pulled me aside one day when I went to pick up my kids, and he said, "I want to apologize to you for everything that I have ever done to you." He goes, "I am so sorry."
Yeah.
And that was huge, because here's someone who's been so abusive for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And to have them actually stop and say, because he used to blame me for everything,
Yeah.
and for him to actually take responsibility and apologize for it, and then he promised me that he would never be like that to her ever.
Wow.
Which that's something that's really huge. I'm like, God just started showing me things that he was starting to work in my life, but I was still hesitant, and I was still resisting, and I'm like, okay, whatever, it's.
Oh, so this was him, like you saw this in him, and was he inspired by the Lord at all, or no?
No.
Okay.
But I had been praying.
Okay.
I had started praying at this point, but I wasn't going to church regularly, and I still wasn't, I was on the fence still.
Okay.
And God was showing me things, and it's like, okay, well, that could have been, but I can explain it away.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready.
He was showing. It sounds like he was showing. Whereas you were at a point where I don't have anything to live for. What is this life? There's no beauty in it.
Right.
And he was opening your eyes slowly to the beauty that is in the world.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it wasn't long after that, actually, that I met my husband, Paul.
Paul, on that note, let me interrupt you, because I wanted to say that, like, people like your ex-husband are villainized a lot in society, and obviously what he was doing isn't right, but the way I came to the Lord was through a Satanist witch. Like, she told me she was a Satanist witch and showed me some stuff. I realized the enemy is real, and then I ran looking for the Lord, and I said, God's got to be real. But I grew closer to the Lord, and it wasn't until not too long ago that the Lord said about this young lady, he said, she's not your enemy. She is your sister in Christ. She's lost right now.
Right.
You've been looking at her like your enemy. She's not the enemy. You should have been praying for her this whole time.
Right.
And that's what people need is prayers. And it's easy just to put them on the side and say, no, well, that's a villain, and forget him. But that's not what the Lord calls us to do.
Right. Yeah, and I had spent a lot of time with, I would walk around with people just at arm's length. I didn't let anybody in. I I wouldn't hug people. I wouldn't smile. I didn't talk. I didn't.
They still all had an agenda to you, right? Like
yes,
you were talking about.
Yeah, because I was still trying to figure out what the agenda was. And then I met my husband, my current husband, and he,
Paul Thurman, who was a chaplain in the Army at the time, right?
No, he wasn't a chaplain in the Army. He actually got his chaplaincy after.
Oh, after you guys got it.
But yeah, he worked with the ordnance.
Hey, Johnny, why don't you let her tell the story? Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. No, he worked with ordnance, so he worked with bombs.
Oh, okay.
And yeah,
because he's crazy. Pablo is.
Yes, he is.
Pathologically insane.
Yeah. But yeah, he wound up with some brain injuries, and he was having seizures. And I was working in the clinic that he came through. And I guess he had seen me a few times, and he was asking the girls for my number, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for I've got 4 kids, and I'm a single parent in the military.
Yeah.
I don't have time.
Yeah.
And it was just he pursued me for a while.
Yeah.
From a gurney, which is I would think very hard
to
do.
Using the gurney,
yeah. A gurney, I could walk away at any time, but
slow Pablo down.
He was my patient, so I had to go back in that room and check on him all the time. So it was very frustrating for me. So finally, I gave him my number.
Yeah.
Yes, and I met him in.
I want to turn the camera around and see Pablo's facial expressions. Hilarious.
But we met in February, and by June we were married.
Nice.
That's how quick it went. We were just like, wow,
Yeah. What happened? Did he just like sweep you off your feet? I mean, he was just so different from your ex.
He was different. Not just from my ex, but just from other guys. Because I had run across guys in the military after I got my divorce that they were only interested in that one thing.
Yeah.
And Paul was different. I mean, I told him the stipulations for us going out. He had to date me, but he had to date all my children as well.
Yeah.
So all 4 of my kids went out with us on our dates.
Yeah.
And by the time he did get a date to himself, I had assumed that was what he was going to be after, and I was actually ready to do that, and he was the one who said no.
Wow. So what did you think at that point? That must have blown your mind.
Yeah. My feelings were a little hurt.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, what's wrong with me?
Okay.
But after thinking about it, I was like, no, he was just trying to show me respect.
Yeah.
To show me that that's not why he's interested in hanging around with me. It's because he wants to get to know me.
Yeah.
And not anything further than that.
Yeah.
And so it was very different. It was just really different.
So at first you were like, your feelings were hurt, but then you came to realize that it wasn't that he didn't like you, obviously.
Right, because he called the next day.
Yeah.
So it's not like, he's like, well, I'm never, going to hear from this guy again,
my friend David I was telling you about is a good-looking young kid, and every time I went to go see him, he had these very good-looking girls just surrounding him, because they were in love with the Lord in him and the Spirit strong in him. And when I was an atheist, I was like, is that your girl? And he's like, no, she wants me, but I don't want to. I'm like, why? Why don't you want to? And I couldn't understand that he wasn't messing around with all of these girls. Like that blew my mind. I didn't understand why. Now I do. But yeah, that must have really took you back.
Oh yeah, it did a lot. And then we had our daughter Carolyn, and she's 6 now.
Beautiful young lady.
But after we had her, we moved. We were in Colorado still, and we moved to Texas. And we were still working on getting his VA stuff was still having some issues, and we weren't getting a lot of money to live on.
Okay.
So I started going to the plasma donation center where they pay you for your plasma. So that's how I bought groceries. So I was selling my plasma. But the problem with that though is the fact I have heart issues.
Oh my goodness.
So one trip I went down there, and they did what's called infiltration on my vein. They stuck the needle all the way through.
Yeah.
It went in and out, the other side of my vein. And so when they were trying to put my red blood cells back in, the plasma back in, after they separated the plasma from the red blood cells, it started filling my arm up. And my arm, you could see it was just swelling bigger and bigger as on my left arm.
Yeah.
And eventually it caused my heart to stop because there was so much pressure buildup.
Wow.
And I didn't realize what was going on.
Yeah.
But when my heart stopped, the nurses there, they weren't paying attention to me. They were paying attention to my arm because they were trying to fix the needle on my arm and everything else. And all I remember is I left.
Yeah.
I left, and I went, and there was the bright, just, you can't describe it kind of light. I mean, it's just so bright. I mean, if you were to look at it, you would probably go blind because, I mean, you cannot imagine how bright and warm and it's just comfortable. It's nice and peaceful. There's no pain. It's just like, this is awesome. This is where I want to stay. You know, this is don't let me go back. This is where I belong.
Yeah.
Then I had somebody that came up to me, and they put their hands on my shoulders, just real gentle. Yeah. Just came up, and they had come up next to me. Yeah. Right in my ear, and they just whispered, "You're not done yet." And I got pushed back. I could feel being pushed back, and then I woke up, back in that chair, and it hurt. It felt like I got slammed by a truck just waking up. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like in such peaceful. Because
it was so great.
It was so wonderful, and I didn't want to leave, and then just to come back to this, and it was like, oh, this hurts. Everything about this hurts, and I was so upset because I was just like, no, I'm ready, but I wasn't listening. I still wasn't listening. That I'm not done yet here. Yeah. You know, whatever, because I still wasn't listening.
It's hard to, like, even I 5 minutes from now, I'll walk out the door and he'll tell me to do something, and I'll be like, what? Yes. No, I don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been hard, but I've been working on obedience and listening. Yeah. So, I've been, getting into the Bible, and, after that point is when I was like, okay, God is real. Yeah. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. God is real.
So it was after that moment that you realized he is completely real.
Yes.
Before, where you were just like, okay.
Yeah, I was still kind of, I was like, I'll pray and whatever, but I wasn't really fully there.
A lot of Christians are like that. They're just kind of, okay, yes, my parents were Christian, I'm going to church, there's cute girls at church, or cute boys, or whatever, and just kind of halfway, whatever, unless it gets inconvenient, and then they're like, okay, no, forget this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and then, and it's like, I have so many people that I've talked to, they're like, well, I don't believe in, God, that he doesn't exist, and they try to convince me that he doesn't exist, and my response to that is, you cannot convince me that God doesn't exist. I've seen him. I've been there.
That's what.
It's like, you cannot tell, and then they try this whole scientific thing. Well, lack of oxygen to your brain, and this and that, and it's like, you cannot explain it away through that.
You can't explain the Holy Spirit or the Lord. They have to. There's a movie there's a line in the movie called The Matrix. Have you seen The Matrix? Mm-hmm. Which is totally a Christian allegory, and it was kind of my introduction to Christianity. But the character Morpheus says, you can't. No one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Right.
And that's how it is with the Lord. Like, you can't explain it.
Right.
You can't have like a math equation. Go, see, God is real.
Right.
You just have to be open to it, and he will show you when you're open to it.
Yes.
In the meantime, you can't explain it to anybody, because I have atheist friends, and they do the same thing. They're like, no, look, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, what are you? I talk to God every day. I talked to him this morning. I'm talking to him right now. Mm-hmm. What are you going to tell me?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the only thing that you can tell people, you can't explain, if you've had an experience like mine, you can't explain that. There's no words for it.
No.
I mean, what I'm telling you, it doesn't even do it justice.
No.
To what I've seen. No. But, it's like, well, I found a quote that said, I can't make you believe in God, but I can make you feel his love.
Yes.
So, it's...
I love that quote.
You just have to, whether those people are willing to accept, God in their lives, you can still let them feel his love, and hopefully that's going to plant that seed in them, that it can grow.
And I'll tell you about my friend David, because there was lots of other people before David. He had me working at a faith-based agency for 8 years. Mm-hmm. It was like 300 people, all of them like uber spiritually strong Christian. Like, they recruited right out of the seminary school. So they were all seminary graduates.
Yes.
And they all knew me. I was the atheist, and everybody tried to save me. And I was very prejudiced towards him. Oh, he's going to invite me to his church or whatever. But I just saw there, and it wasn't anything they would say. It was just the way they lived their lives, the way they treated me, the way they acted, that slowly but surely I dropped my guard, and I was like, there's just something good in these people. There's just something good. I didn't know what it was again at the time. So yeah,
that's what my mom, because she grew up in a Catholic school. She went to Catholic school, but she pretty much had turned her back also on her faith. Yeah. And after Paul and I, we started going to church, and we got baptized, and we started following the Lord, and having our walk and our personal relationships with God. Yeah. And my mom came down to visit us one time. Yeah. And before she left, she goes, I want so much to have what you have. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it was like, like, yeah, we have a house and you have an apartment. I don't see, it's like, you don't really need that. But she said, no. She goes, I want so much to have the peace and the love that I see in your family.
Yeah.
She goes, I mean, you can tell that you guys love each other, that there is a love in this house that you can feel. She goes, it's just so different from anything that I've ever experienced. And that kind of started a fire under her. So she's actually started going back to church.
That's how you inspire people to
yes.
the Lord. It's not holding up signs saying you're going to hell if you don't accept
yes.
Jesus. I think as you show him in your life, it's the most powerful way to do it.
Right. So that's what I've been doing, and even I tried really, really hard not to listen.
Yeah.
I've tried so hard not to listen.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some nights where I'll have songs running through my head and I cannot fall asleep until I let Pastor Danny know. I'm like, okay, I think we should sing this song this Sunday. And as soon as I get it out, okay, now I can go to sleep. But he just like sits there and he's like, hello.
He nags it, and you're like,
to me.
No, I don't want to do that. And he's like, he keeps nagging at you
exactly.
until you do it.
Exactly. I'm like, no, it's not my place to say, or it's not, for me to make that decision, or no, he's just gonna think I'm just being stupid or whatever. But no, God's like, no,
the
you're
enemy
gonna do
tries
this.
to talk you out of it in all of these ways.
Yeah, because it gives you all that doubt, that
yes.
self-doubt, and it's horrible. And but I always feel much better when I actually do what I'm supposed to do.
Every conversation with the Lord, when he tells me something, my reaction is almost always like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
No. But then after I do it, I'm like so glad I did it. Every time. He's never wrong.
Yes.
Like never.
Yes.
He's God. But again, 5 minutes from now, he's going to tell me to do something. I'm going to go, really, God? Are you sure? Like, I'm God. Yes, I'm sure.
And he's going to go, weren't you just listening to yourself?
Yeah. No. It's happened so many times. I'm so ridiculous. Yeah. But, so then afterwards, you saw he was real, and you just started getting close to him and pursuing him, and then you saw him work in you to reach out to people like your mom.
Yes. And even for Paul, because, I mean, we've had a couple of times where Paul's just been so... He has PTSD. Yeah. And he's had some times where he was really, really low. Uh-huh. And I've had one instance where I had to pull a gun out of his hand. Oh, wow. And it was actually like a couple weeks after my experience with God, so, telling me you're not done yet. Wow. He was having a really low time, and he had put a loaded gun to his head. Oh, and no. I just walked up and I put my hand right in between his head and the barrel of the gun. Yeah. And, I could very easily, have ended very differently. I mean, I could have lost my hand and my husband all in once. Yeah. But I just stood there and I just waited, and he finally just lowered the gun, and, that was that. Yeah. And, it was just like such a relief. And I was like, all right, come on, we're going to go, we're just going to get out of the house. Yeah. Just go do something, And we had another time where he was having a really, really bad time, and he had a big knife. Yeah. And we were in our bedroom, and I was standing in front of him, so there was a good 4 or 5 feet between us. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like a standoff where, he was just like, he was staring at me, and he's like, if you come anywhere near me, I'm going to cut your throat. And then I just stood there and I didn't say anything. I just didn't say anything. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing that I can really say that's going to make this situation better. Yeah. But I had that same feeling of those hands on my shoulder while I was standing there just looking at him. And that voice came back into my head, and it was just like, just be still. Just be still.
So you had this peace.
Yes.
Even though
I'm standing in a situation where I could potentially be killed. And I'm just standing there, and I'm at complete and total peace, and it's just, don't.
And you just know it's good, because when God tells you it's going to be okay, He doesn't have to tell you why.
Right.
You just
know. You just know it is. Exactly. Yeah. And you have that, you don't have any panic. You don't have any, you just know, okay, we're going to be okay. Yeah. We're going to be okay. I was like, but I'm not allowed to move.
So Paul didn't know the Lord, or he wasn't as close to the Lord at this point, I'm thinking, or just kind of veered off the path a little bit? Or
he did know him, and actually it was after we were baptized even that he was having more of these problems, because the demons started attacking him more.
Yeah, and that happens.
And it's been a process for both of us, obviously, because it's not like you're just like instantly, ooh, I'm there, and so, and every day we're growing, every day. So, but he was just in a low point at that time, and it's not that he didn't know God or didn't trust in God. It was just that he was a little lower at that time, and he just needed
the enemy is very good at what they do.
More encouragement. Yeah. And so that's, he doesn't always like me talking about his stuff, but it really is, it does help when you talk about it, because there are other people out there who are like, okay, wow, I mean, I could have been in that position too, and how would I have reacted, and it's like, or would I have been able to listen to that voice? And some people do ignore it.
Yeah, the Lord's been putting suicide on my, I don't know, because the whole Robin Williams thing, and there was this young lady at Eastern Hills High School who she was like a good student and everything, and nobody would have suspected, and you just never know what lies people are believing.
Yes.
And those of us who know, you just want to scream at them. They're all lies. It doesn't have to be that way, and they have so much to live for, and it's just such a. Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue with your story.
Yeah, that's why I mean, God's really put a lot of hard things in my life.
Yeah.
But I look at all those things that I've gone through. It's like my mom belittling me and telling me I wasn't good enough, and my stepdad telling me I wasn't good enough, my ex-husband telling me I wasn't good enough, and being all that, the physical and emotional abuse that I had to go through. And I looked at that and I was like, that was just preparing me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have wound up just being some super sensitive person that just won't go out of the house or talk to anybody because I'm afraid of the world. And part of me is so scared of the world, because it's like, okay, what if that could happen again?
Yeah.
But then I have my faith in God.
Yeah. And
it's like, no, because what, even if it was to happen again, God's got a purpose for it.
Yeah.
And
that always gets when I'm find myself worrying or anxious or whatever. It's just that thought that I was like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to worry about anything. And it's easier said than done.
Yes.
When you have, like in your situation, when you were, Paul had a knife, or I remember I experienced what you experienced when I got fired from my job, and I was very anxious and afraid, and how am I going to feed my daughter? And he touched me and said, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
And but it's easier said than done sometimes when the world is screaming at you. You absolutely should be worried. You absolutely should be afraid.
Yep.
But you just have to remember, we live by faith, not by what we see around us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Paul's actually the one who actually brought me back into starting to go to church.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, tell us that story.
Well, it was after I had actually had my experience.
Yeah.
We moved from a different area of Texas to this area. And one of the security guards down at the VA was an elder at this church that he went to, and he invited Paul. And so Paul went, and it's like, well, he went to one of their band practices, and he's like, well, it seems like a really nice church. People seem really nice here, so he invited me to go, and we were at that church for a little over a year, I think. Part of that church, and I became the VBS director over there, and worked in the children's ministries a lot, and but there was things happen, and we wound up actually over on Ways of Faith instead, where we felt like we could actually grow more. So because we were becoming kind of stagnant over at the other locations, and sometimes we needed to change.
And that happens. I know. Well, like I said, I'm new. He and I just came back from visiting my old church, where I felt like I did a lot of growing over there, and then he moved me here. And my loyalty is ultimately to the church. This is what it should be, right? But he'll move you at different locations for whatever reasons, and
Yep.
Well.
But yeah, I want to say that when people ask me about my history or my past, and they're like, "Wow, it's like how did you manage to do that?" And I just I look at them sometimes. I say, God's got a really funny sense of humor.
Yeah.
He really does have a funny sense of humor, because there were so many things in my life where I was like, "Gosh, why is this happening?" And then eventually, I would see the purpose behind it. Sometimes many years later. And some things, I'm sitting here still wondering, why. But sometimes when you see the purpose many years later, and then you're like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, and he knows everything, and he laughs at us. So we're not in a loving way.
Yes.
Because he sees us messing up, and he's in control of everything.
Exactly. It's like, and unfortunately, all of us, the majority of us that are believers and that we follow Christ, and we all tend to be at some point in our lives that child who has to learn the hard way.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, he's not a believer either. But Paul did the ceremony for my mom and dad. My mom and dad got remarried.
What?
Just this past month, and Paul did the ceremony, and he agreed to a Christian ceremony. So that's a big thing, because my dad he's an on the fence person.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a big thing for him to say
but
yes.
Like your mom, he's got to see you two, and says that, you know, like I saw with those people at the agency's called ACH. It was All Church Home for Children. I was like, there's, you know, at the time I blew them off as, oh well, they're just dumb buying into this Christianity stuff. But after a while, I couldn't help but notice, okay, whatever, Johnny, but they have this joy that you don't have.
Right.
So it's a dumb one.
Exactly. It's a miserable existence when you don't believe.
Oh my goodness, it
miserable.
So is. There's no meaning.
And
in
you know
it.
they say misery loves company.
Yes.
I mean, they're the miserable people. That's why they're trying to steal everybody else's joy, because they're like, I don't want you to be happy if I can't be happy.
And they might not even know that they're doing.
Right.
Because they're under the control of the enemy. Whatever part you don't give over to the Lord, you're under the enemy's control. Like, people try to tell me back then, it's like, no, I don't believe in the devil either. You know, but that's what you don't get is there's a war going on. And if you don't know about the war, then you're losing, buddy. If you don't even know about it, you're losing. Tanya, I think we're about out of time. Any closing words?
Well, I think in regards to the war too, is, you know, God's with you with all your battles.
Yeah.
You know, just take it one battle at a time. Don't keep, you know, don't think that, okay, we have to win the entire war right now today, because it's going to be won. I mean, God, it's already won. Yeah. Jesus already did that for us.
Yeah, that's
so, you know, don't even worry about it, because, you know, you go ahead and He's with you with your battles.
Yeah.
You know, and just take them one day at a time. Just breathe.
Being
and thank
still.
God.
Being still is sometimes the hardest thing to do. That's
yes.
what He wants us to do a lot.
Be still and listen.
Yeah.
Listen to Him.
Oh my goodness. Well, Tanya, I tell you, I'm blown away by your testimony. I never would have guessed any of that, and it just goes to show you don't know what people have been through. You don't, you know, and we're so quick to judge someone whenever they. And part of the war I'm talking about is that negativity is thrown your way. And it's so easy just when you're in the world just to throw it right back. You know, but that's the war I'm talking about when you're the spiritual warfare. He calls us, I think, to shine the light, even, as a matter of fact, especially in the face of darkness.
Right.
It's easier said than done.
Oh yeah, very much so.
But that's what His mighty warriors are called to do, right, Paul? Well, okay. Well, this has been Johnny and Tanya sharing her testimony at Waves Live. We're no longer in the name of Jesus. We're Waves Live now. It's the name of the show. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a blessed week. You have a blessed week ahead of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.